Okay, I want to talk a little bit about Nephthys, who, you know me, I believe that she is one of the really hidden powerhouses of Kemetic mythology. One of the goddesses who really never gets her shine in her own way because she is the twin almost of Aset, popularly known as Isis and all other types of names. So Nephthys is buried behind this because she really represents the concept of duality with Aset. Whereas Aset is the light, she is the darkness. Aset is order, she is more chaos. She is good, whereas Aset represents life. She is a goddess associated with death. Always friendly though, right? So let's be honest about Nephthys. If you run into Nephthys, she's got your back. She's probably going to give you something to drink because you're going to be thirsty, and you are in the underworld. Let's just go and get that. But let's look at where her worship comes from, because this is a deity who is deserved of the microscope. Now, in early pre-dynastic Kemet, we're saying roughly before 3100 BCE, there really is no textual evidence of Nephthys. But there are still beliefs in some of these like proto-goddesses who kind of suggest primordial roles of shadow, death, and night, which firmly fits in her wheelhouse. And this concept of the goddess is baked in their early cosmology when we see the dualities, which is the groundwork for her later associations with Aset that would come later. Now, by the Old Kingdom, roughly 2686 to 2181, she starts to appear in the pyramid text. She's often associated with funerary texts, which makes sense. She is invoked alongside Aset in spells of resurrection, rebirth, and particularly any of the guarding of Osiris. Now, her role was complementary. We remember they're very powerful, but was complementary to Aset's story. She was not competitive, but she was already firmly established as a silent guardian in the funerary world. So she had a natural place in the resurrection story of Asar or Osiris, as you may know him. Now, she's often associated with Anubis or Anpu, either as his mother, which is the context I've held them in most often, or as a guardian figure, and that varies on the myth by the region. Now, she's also the part of this divine mourning pair with Aset mourning Asar. Again, and we'll talk about their individual relationships, but we're going to talk about her timeline now. And this is an image that is repeated throughout Kemetic ritual literature, that association. Now, by the Middle Kingdom, we're saying 2055 to 1650, she became a mainstay in the coffin text and like temple hymns. She appears with Set not as a villainess, but as a divine consort, because at this time, Set hasn't become demonized the way he would during later periods. And her role is solidified as the mortuary religion. She stands at the head of the corpse, while Aset stands at the feet. Again, there are two roles in context with each other. But there's a growing concern with the afterlife at this point, and Nephthys plays a greater role in, in common burials, not just for royal tombs, but for all of us, because we're known that she would be the one to greet you if that's your mindset. Now, by the New Kingdom, which is basically 1550 to 1070 BCE, Nephthys is fully integrated in the Book of Coming Forth by Day ritual. She'd be very important because she's the one you're hoping to see when you wake up for the first time. She has strong worship in Abydos and Heliopolis, especially at Asarian cults. They are heavily digging her because of her role in bringing him back. And her iconography has become standardized. So we see her in her name as Nebet-Het across her crown, which is what she's also known as. She's associated with protection of the canopic jars of Hapi, one of the four sons of Heru or Horus, and there's all types of lamentations of Nephthys at this point, including personal invocations for protections into the afterlife, but altars as well. Like, she's very beloved at this time, and she will remain so going into the late period, which is about 712 to 332 BCE. And this is at the height of the religious area. She is more standalone worship at this point, although always tied to her brother-sister pairing, and she becomes more mystical. She's this veiled goddess of secrets, initiations, and the space between life and death. Now, she has temples at Edfu and Dendera that reference her as the guardian of sacred knowledge, a very revered principal deity. Now, by the fall of all this into the rise of the time of the Greek and the Roman, she is still expanding into Mediterranean territory along with Aset, who is the primary worship, as she was more readily integrated. And we'll see more texts, especially like the Hermetic writings and the papyrus, that mention her in a sorceress role, being a spiritual power invoked in necromancy and healing rituals. Now, her connection to Set at this point is reconceptualized because he is seen more as a demon. He would be associated later with Satan and a host of other demonic figures, and this distances her from him in their cult. And it's an interesting relationship that these two have that I'll also speak on in a bit. Now, coming out of this period, Nephthys has enjoyed a sort of a revival with the renewance of interest in the Kemetic belief system. She is still seen as the goddess of mourning and of the shadows. She's a patron of spiritual transformations and the mother of transitions, protectress of the forgotten. And in this new age, she is seen as the dark twin of Aset, a connection that she's always had as a necessary counterbalance to light, order, and rebirth. She fits in that narrative and always has shown herself in literature to be not only closely associated with her sister, but deeply connected to her sister on emotional levels. These two really love each other. They're great sisters, and we'll talk about their connection in other stories. But if you have more that you want to ask me about, please hit me up in the comment sections, and let's talk more about gods.